Hare Krishna, devotees. Welcome to day 20 of our Bhakti Vaibhava seminar on Srimad Bhagavatam, day 20 of Canto 2. Yes, and we are in the 7th chapter of the second canto, which is dealing with it's the second chapter actually, which is dealing with the different incarnations. The first chapter dealing with incarnations was first canto chapter 3, and this is dealing with some different incarnations. It's sort of just a little bit different perspective on the subject of the different avatars and incarnations. So, okay, let's get into it. First of all, our prayers. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschachadesha Tarne Shri Krishna Chaitanya Brahmanityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shivas Adi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vanchkalpaturabhyas Chakripas Sindhubhya Evacha Paditanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Right, so the last day we did make a start to this chapter, just a little start actually, and we're continuing on from verse 4. And verse 4 is discussing Dattatreya. Okay, so here's the translation. The great sage Atri prayed for offspring, and the Lord, being satisfied with him, promised to incarnate as Atri's son Dattatreya, which means Datta, the son of Atri. And by the grace of the lotus feet of the Lord, many yadus, high-highers, etc., became so purified that they obtained both material and spiritual blessings. Okay, so let's have a look at the purport. So Srila Prabhupada begins by talking about different types of eternal relationships with the Lord, 5 particularly main loving relationships with the Lord, Shantadasya, Sakya, Vatsalya, and Madhurya, neutral servitude, friendship, parental rasa, and conjugal rasa. So Atri, who's the father of the incarnation, Dattatreya. So Atri was in Vatsalya Ras, means the parental rasa. He wanted the Lord as his son, and because he was a very elevated person, the Lord agreed. The Lord appeared as his son. Not that anyone who just has some idea, I'd like to have a relationship with the Lord as this or that it's just going to come to be like that. It's really on an elevated platform, and that was the case here. So therefore, the Lord appeared as Atri's son. And Prabhupada makes the point here in the purport that he appeared as Atri's son, but actually, if you look at it in another sense, the Lord has an unlimited number of father devotees. Yes, so many. Here it's Atri, but then of course there's Nanda Maharaj, there's Vasudev, there's Dasarath, who is the father of Lord Ramachandra, and so many others. Yeah. And of course, ultimately, the Lord is Father of all living entities. But out of transcendental affection, the Lord thrives on affection, on love. So out of transcendental love, he becomes someone's son, and actually prefers, Prabhupada says, he prefers to be in the position of a son rather than to be the father, because the son generally receives more affection than the father. Fathers tend to be taken for granted. Yes. So Prabhupada makes an important point. The impersonalists, they want to become one with the Lord. But the devotee, at least in the Vatsalya Rasa particularly, is not just equal to the Lord, but senior to the Lord, on a higher position as a father in the Vatsalya Rasa and the parental Rasa. So then the devotee is, as fathers do, telling the son, do this, don't do that, like this. So some Prabhupada makes the point, sometimes devotees who are in parental rasa, they get special opulences, even like mystic powers sometimes. But pure devotees don't want that. You know, like Kolavecha Shrita with Lord Chaitanya. When Lord Chaitanya finally, after many interactions, Lord Chaitanya revealed himself to Kolavecha Shrita as the Lord then offered him different benedictions. Would you like a planet? And Kolavecha Shrita said, no, just let me be a devotee. Or like Prahlad with Nrsimhadev, after the killing of Hiranyakashipu, the Lord told Prahlad, I want to give you something, ask for something. Means something material. At least Prahlad took it like that. And he said, no, thank you. I don't want to take anything from you. I just want to serve you. That's our position. I'm your servant, you're my master, and not that you should feel that you must give me something in exchange for my service. Yeah. So, of course, they are pure devotees, Kolavecha Shrita Prahlad Maharaj, and we're not on that level. We're not on that level. So we need, of course, we are contaminated by so many years and lifetimes in material life, where everyone is trying to get benefit for themselves and get pleasure for themselves. So for us, we of course, we have to break that habit. Or you can say, we have to become purified, cleansed of that habit. So therefore we have to practice serving. Practice and practice and practice. That's sadhana bhakti. And then gradually it'll come more and more natural. We'll become more and more inclined just to serve and not want something from the Lord, but just be happy by serving Him. Yeah, so of course, and Prabhupada makes the point, as we're trying to do that, we have to be careful of offenses, because they can really set us back in our Krishna consciousness. And Srila Prabhupada, towards the end, almost practically at the end of the purport, Prabhupada gives an example of this, of offenses. in devotional service. Prabhupada says the vivid example is Haya, who achieved all such perfection in devotional service. But because of his offense at the feet of a devotee, he was killed by Lord Parasuram. So we move on to verse 5. This whole section goes on. I don't expect we'll get through the whole section today, up to verse 30-something. And here we are now, verse 5. To create different planetary systems, I had to undergo austerities and penance. And the Lord, this is Lord Brahma speaking, of course, and the Lord, thus being pleased with me, incarnated in 4 sanas. In 4 sanas. In the previous creation, the spiritual truth was devastated, but the 4 sanas explained it so nicely that the truth at once became clearly perceived by the sages. So, right, the purport here, there's a couple of paragraphs. Prabhupada begins the purport by saying, the Vishnu Sahasranam prayers mention the Lord's name as Sanat and Sanatanatama. Sanatanatama. So, we and the Lord, we're all Sanatan, we're all eternal, but the Lord is Sanatan Tama, Sanatana Tama, or eternal to the superlative degree. That's interesting. The jivas, we are positively Sanatan, but not superlatively, because, and Prabhupada explains that, it's very important, we are prone to fall down and end up not just in the material world, but in material life. So therefore we are qualitatively different, Prabhupada says, from the superlative Sanatan, who is the Lord. And the second paragraph, the word son, Prabhupada says, is also used in the sense of charity. So when everything is given in charity to the Lord, he reciprocates by giving himself to the devotee. That's such an amazing and wonderful part of Krishna consciousness. And of course it's confirmed in Bhagavad Gita chapter 4 verse 11, very famous verse in that regard, Yeya tamam prabhajante, tams tataiva bhajamyaham. All of them as they surrender to me, I reciprocate, I reward them accordingly. Yeah. So Lord Brahma, this is the new kalpa, the new millennium. Brahma wanted to create the whole cosmic situation as it had been in the previous kalpa, the previous millennium. But in the previous devastation, at the end of the previous millennium, knowledge of the absolute truth was completely erased from the whole universe. So, yes, but he wanted to create the cosmos as it was previously. He wanted the same knowledge. Otherwise there'd be no meaning to the creation. It was just like whimsically done. So this was achieved. Prabhupada explains this mission of Brahmaji was fulfilled by the grace of the Lord when the four Sanas, Sanaka, Sanat Kumar, Sanandan, and Sanatan Kumar, all four Kumars, appeared as his four sons. They were incarnations of knowledge of the Lord. And so they explained it very, very nicely. So all the sages who were present right at the beginning of the universe, they could easily assimilate this knowledge. Yes. And Prabhupada makes the point, he concludes the purport by saying, by following in the footsteps of the four Kumars, one can at once see the Supreme Personality of Godhead within oneself. Okay, so we move on to verse 6, and the particular incarnation or incarnations, twin forms, which are described here in verse 6, they're Nara and Narayan. So the verse goes, to exhibit his personal way of austerity and penance, he appeared in twin forms as Narayan and Nara in the womb of Murti, the wife of Dharma and the daughter of Daksha. Celestial beauties, the companions of Cupid, went to try to break his vows, but they were unsuccessful. For they saw that many beauties like them were emanating from him, the personality of Godhead. So all these companions of Cupid, whose whole business and orientation, that's what they're all about, is materially attracting the opposite sex, they tried to do that. But then they saw that many beauties, beautiful women, like themselves, as beautiful as themselves, were emanating from him. Yeah. So yeah, it's interesting. Nara and Narayan, Prabhupada speaks of them, first of all, as twins. There's two of them. But then, not Prabhupada, but the verse. But then, still in the verse talks about Nara and Narayan as being one. So many beauties emanated from him. So, okay, let's have a look here at the purport. Yes. It's just one paragraph, but it's quite substantial. So Srila Prabhupada makes the point that the Lord, the source of everything, including penances and austerities. And sages, so many sages take great vows of austerity for their success in self-realization. And the fact is, the human life is meant for austerity, particularly for brahmacharis. Tapasa brahmacharyena yamena cha. Yeah, for the brahmacharis, Prabhupada makes the point that in the rigid life of tapasya, there is no place for the association of women at all. Right. So, therefore, in the process, the system of Sanatan Dharma, the association of women is only allowed in one of the ashrams. in the Grihastha ashram, but it's not allowed in the Brahmachari ashram. It's not allowed, at least in the sort of, essential form of family life and developing a family, having children, and developing facilities for living and all that. In Vanaprastha life, that there's no place for that. And even though the wife may or usually accompanies the husband in Vanaprastha life, but it's just in a very renounced spirit, just assisting the husband who's preaching to her, and there's none of the typical Grihastha ways of having exchange. So like this, according to Sanatana Dharma, life is divided into 4 stages. Celibacy, first of all, brahmacharya, household life. Vanaprastha means retirement, and then renunciation, sannyas life. First stage up to 25, there's training as a brahmachari, which essentially includes being trained to understand how women are the binding force in this world. And it's really essential to get free from that. Women generally are like the enchanting principle, and the male human form is for the self-realization principle. I mean, not that women can't practice self-realization. We see so many ladies in the Krishna consciousness movement, but classically, women are part of the enchanting feature of material life, and the male human form is specifically intended for self-realization. So the whole world is moving like that, under the influence of female attraction. And as soon as a man becomes united with a woman, then he becomes caught up in all sorts of material bondage, and it's like a tight knot. And Srila Prabhupada explains that the following things develop amongst men by association with women. First of all, the desire to lord it over the material world. Then secondly, the desire to acquire a house. Then the desire to get land, have children. Then the desire to become prominent in society. The desire for affection from community, place of birth. And then sixth, hankering for wealth. These are all part of household existence. And these encumber a man who particularly, not that women can't do it, as we mentioned, they definitely can, but particularly for men, they're specifically meant to really focus on and cultivate their spiritual lives. That's what their lives are meant to be all about. Right, so in the 3 higher varnas means Brahmins first of all, then Kshatriyas, then Vaishyas. Those boys would be trained in an ashram by a guru. The Sudra children would not, but the boys of the Vaishyas, Kshatriyas, and Brahmins would be trained by the guru until they're 25. And then the idea was by the time they reached 25, after that training, they would really be able to understand the values in life. Yeah. Then they can go home and marry, but because of the training, they're not just going to become typically entangled householders. But even Prabhupada makes the point that many brahmacharis, they actually continue, they remain celibate. At least traditionally it was like that. Many of them would. And because of that, then they take sannyas at a younger age because they knew the problems related to getting involved with women. Yes. So, and therefore, as a result of that, there would be many more ladies than men in sort of non-celibate, just regular society. And therefore, the Kshatriyas and Vaishyas to some degree might take more than one wife. So, and Prabhupada makes a very interesting point, the guru would decide who should marry and who shouldn't. Yes. And then, after being trained like that, they were such good householders that when they reached the age of 50, they would, it was just normal. They'd become vanaprasthas and then sannyasis. So the Supreme Lord himself came as Narayan to teach this. Yes. And Prabhupada makes the point that demigods try to cause the brahmacharis to fall down by sending, Prabhupada says, soldiers of Cupid. Yeah, the demigods, being envious of the austere life of the rigid brahmacharis, would try to cause them to break their vows by dispatching soldiers of Cupid. Oh my gosh. Dispatching beautiful ladies. Yes. And that's what happened here. They came. But in the case of Narayan, the ladies, they're trying to attract his mind, but suddenly they saw so many other beautiful ladies were coming from Narayan. Yes. And Prabhupada makes the point. There's a common proverb that a confectioner, a sweet maker, is never attracted by sweets. Yeah. Right. So the Lord can make so many beauties, but he's never attracted by them. So Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, one who does not know alleges foolishly that Lord Krishna enjoyed women in his Rasa Leela in Vrindavan, or with his 16,000 married wives at Dwaraka. Yeah. So foolish people who don't understand things properly about the Lord, that's what they think. The Lord was married to so many wives in Dwaraka, and he had rasa dance with so many beautiful young gopis in Vrindavan. He must have been attracted materially and really fascinated by their feminine charms. But they don't understand that those relationships were all transcendental. So verse 47, which is now, it's an interesting point in this chapter. Unlike chapter 3 in the first canto, where there was just one verse for each avatar. Here we sometimes find there's 2 and sometimes more verses dealing with a particular avatar. So verse 7 is related to Nara and Narayan. So the verse says, great stalwarts like Lord Shiva can, by their wrathful glances, overcome lust and vanquish him. Yet they cannot be free from the overwhelming effects of their own wrath. Wrath meaning anger. Such wrath can never enter into the heart of him, the Lord, who is above all this. So how can lust take shelter in his mind? So Prabhupada mentions it's a little bit famous story, Puranic story, how Cupid, that one time Lord Shiva was engaged in severe austerities, and Cupid came and threw his arrow of sex desire at Lord Shiva. But Lord Shiva was deeply focused spiritually. And so Lord Shiva became angry that this attempt was made to make him fall down. So Lord Shiva glanced at him in anger and burned up Cupid to ashes. So the point there is, Prabhupada brings out the point, that Lord Shiva, even though he's so powerful, he's not free from anger. But with Lord Vishnu, there's no such anger. There's the story, which we told a couple of times yesterday, actually, of Bhrigu Muni testing, first of all Lord Brahma, then Lord Shiva, then Lord Vishnu, to see how self-controlled they are. And he offended Brahma, his father, mentally by just not being respectful in attitude. With Lord Shiva, he offended him verbally by telling him to get away because look at you, you're dirty, and like that. But with Bhrigu Muni, he offended him physically. Offense works on 3 levels: mental, verbal, physical. So Bhrigu Muni kicked Vishnu in the chest, but Lord Vishnu didn't become at all angry. In fact, Lord Vishnu apologized, first of all, said, I hope you didn't hurt your soft lotus foot on my hard chest. And then he thanked Bhrigu Muni that now my wife, who up till now won't come any closer to me than my feet, but now because the dust from your feet is on my chest, now she'll embrace me to get some of that dust. Right. And it's an interesting point that Lord Vishnu on his chest has the sign of Bhrigu Pad. There's a marking of Bhrigu's foot from that pastime as a mark of tolerance. So Srila Prabhupada says, the Lord therefore is never affected by any kind of wrath or anger. So how can there be any place for lust, which is less strong than wrath? Isn't that interesting? Anger is stronger than lust. That's really interesting. And where there's no anger, there's no lust. So the Lord, Prabhupada explains, the Lord is apta kama, one who can fulfill his own desires. He doesn't need any other person to help him fulfill his desires. Of course, he's unlimited, so his desires are unlimited. And we are limited. So how can the limited fulfill all the desires of the unlimited? Obviously, it's not possible. So Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, the conclusion is that the absolute personality of Godhead has neither lust nor anger. And even if there is sometimes a show of lust and anger by the absolute, it should be considered an absolute benediction. Okay, now verse 8, which is about Lord Vishnu as Prishnigarbha, the Lord of Dhruva, that particular form of the Lord who appeared to Dhruva after he'd performed his austerities, and the Lord then tapped him on the head with his conch shell. Right, so the verse 8, being insulted by sharp words spoken by the co-wife of the king, even in his presence, Prince Dhruva, although only a boy, took to severe penances in the forest. And the Lord, being satisfied by his prayer, awarded him the Dhruva planet, which is worshipped by great sages, both upward and downward. So Srila Prabhupada gives fairly extensive purport. First of all, he explains the story of Dhruva, although that actually is explained in detail in the 4th canto, but at least in the first paragraph, Prabhupada briefly explains how Dhruva was insulted by his father on the instigation of his stepmother, or the co-wife of his mother. They were both queens of the king. Yeah. So, and because of his Kshatriya nature, his Kshatriya pride, he wanted to teach his father a lesson. He wanted to get a kingdom bigger than his father's. So he asked his mother, how can I do that? And his mother said, I think you should ask God. And Dhruva said, okay, where's God? I'm going to find him and ask him. And his mother, Suniti, said, well, I heard that when people want to find God, they go to the forest. So Dhruva said, right, that's it. And off he went to the forest. And he performed severe austerities there under the supervision of Narada Muni. And Narada gave him a combination of Bhakti Yoga and Ashtanga Yoga. So on one hand, through Bhakti Yoga, he got the mercy of the Lord and the Lord appeared to him. But on the other hand, he became powerful through the Ashtanga Yoga. So, right, Prabhupada explains it all, and how Narada gave him the spiritual part of what Narada gave him, particularly, was the mantra, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So Narada gave that mantra to Dhruva, who then chanted and chanted and chanted. So in the end, the Lord appeared to him. Yes, on the basis of his chanting the holy names. And of course, Dhruva, by the time he reached that point, he was completely purified through the chanting. So then the Lord said, okay, you want a kingdom, right? And Dhruva said, no, now I've got you, that's all I need. But still the Lord gave him Dhruva Loka, which is a Vaikuntha planet within the material world. A specific planet, Prabhupada says, above the 7 stars. Yeah. It's a fixed Vaikuntha planet, installed in the material atmosphere by the will of the Lord. So, right, Dhruva became perfect by the mercy of Narada, and because it's a Vaikuntha planet, it's worshipped even by the denizens of the 7 stars, which are below the Dhruva planet. So like the Struva became perfect by the mercy of Narada, this type of point is made by Srila Prabhupada regularly, that mercy comes from the devotees. Blessings come from the devotees. Therefore we should always serve the devotees, glorify the devotees, please the devotees. Yeah. And Prabhupada then says, this is in the last paragraph, or almost last, a serious personality can thus achieve the highest perfection of meeting the Lord and attain his objective simply by being guided by a pure devotee who automatically approaches by dint of one's serious determination to meet the Lord by all means. So that's how it works. If one is really serious about becoming Krishna conscious, meeting the Lord, that perfection, then on the basis of one's serious determination to meet the Lord, one will meet a great devotee who will then guide you. And that's how it worked with Srila Prabhupada. So many young people who were really looking for something better, higher in life, and something spiritual, they found they met Prabhupada, all by the grace of Krishna. Okay. Verse 9 then is about Maharaj Prithu, who is a Shaktivesh avatar. And like Dhruva, he's also described in detail in the 4th canto. So here's the verse. Maharaj Vena went astray from the path of righteousness, and the Brahmins chastised him by the thunderbolt curse. By this, King Vena was burned with his good deeds and opulence, and was en route to hell. The Lord, by his causeless mercy, descended as his son by the name of Prithu. Who then delivered the condemned King Vena from hell and exploited the earth by drawing all kinds of crops as produce. Right. So there's an extensive purport. So Prabhupada talks about Varnashram, first of all, how the Brahmins are guardians of society. They instruct the Kshatriyas. The Kshatriyas are not autocratic. They would always consult with the Brahmins, who are more intelligent, how to run society. So there was no need for democracy. And we see now in the Western world, I mean, in so many places actually, the failure of democracy. It's really amazing. People for quite some years were thinking that the way to govern is through democracy. Get the opinions of the people, let the people decide. Because if the people decide, then the people can't complain. At least the majority of them shouldn't be able to complain if they've chosen the government. Yes, so it's a clever little strategic move to try to get control. See what the people want, make sure they get what they want, then they'll vote for you, and that way you're in power for indefinitely. Right. So Prabhupada makes the point that less intelligent people don't know what's good for them. Like a child doesn't know what's good for him. Society, these people, these types of people, society in general, needs the guidance of Brahmins, who are not paid servants of the king. So they had the strength to dictate to the king on the principles of Shastra. Yeah. So Prabhupada says this went on to the time of King Chandragupta, or Emperor Chandragupta, who had Chanakya as his main Brahmin advisor. Yeah. Then in the second paragraph, talks about Vena. Vena, he just got carried away by his position. Even as a child, he thought he was so important that when he would play games with his friends, like cops and robbers, where in play people may shoot each other in play, something like that, but he would actually kill his friends in those games. Yes. So he disobeyed the Brahmins, and he just ruled as he wanted to do. And as a result, even though he was a very strong ruler and generally maintained law and order, but at the same time he was a terrible autocrat and despot. So the Brahmins, who had the interest of the people at heart, they prayed to the Lord and then cursed Vena, who died on the spot from their curse. So in the third paragraph, Prabhupada begins by saying, long life, obedience, good reputation, righteousness, prospects of being promoted to heavenly planets, and blessings of great personalities are all vanquished. All these things are destroyed simply by disobedience to a great soul. So Vena, he just neglected the great souls and was punished as a result. It became illegal to glorify the Supreme Lord when Vena was ruling. Yes. So the Brahmins then, understanding that this man is just way off track and he's just dragging society right down, so eventually they cursed him and he died. And then Prithu came from his body. Yes. And this is described, Prabhupada says, in detail in the Vamana Purana. And Prabhupada, at the end of this paragraph, says, when Maharaj Prithu heard about the hellish condition of his father, Vena, who was suffering from leprosy in the family of a Malecha, he at once brought the former king to Kurukshetra for his purification and relieved him of all sufferings. It's quite a purport, isn't it? So final paragraph. It's short, I'll just read that paragraph. Maharaj Prithu, the incarnation of God, descended by the prayer of the Brahmins to rectify the disorders on earth. He produced all kinds of crops, but at the same time he performed the duty of a son who delivers his father from hellish conditions. The word putra means one who delivers from hell, called put. That is a worthy son. So putra, put means tra means one who delivers. Trayate mahato bhayat. Bhagavad Gita chapter 2 verse 40 says, one is saved from the greatest type of fear by performing devotional service. Yes. So, okay. Verse 10, Lord Rishabhadev. The Lord appeared as the son of Sudevi, the wife of King Nabi, and was known as Rishabhadev. He performed materialistic yoga to equibalance the mind. This stage is also accepted as the highest perfectional stage of liberation, wherein one is situated in oneself and is completely satisfied. So, this is about Rishabhadev. So, okay, the purport. Jada Yoga. The process was called Jada Yoga, which means or includes becoming like a deaf stone and not being affected by material reactions. Yes. Becoming indifferent to attacks, etc. And becoming like a stone is indifferent. Yes. Such yogis, Prabhupada explains, for self-infliction, to make it tough for themselves. Sometimes they pluck the hairs from their heads. But the real purpose of yoga is to get free from material affection, to be completely situated in the self. So Maharaj Rishabhadev did this. He's going around naked and, sitting in his stool and urine. So less intelligent people, particularly children's, would spit on him and urinate on him because he was like a real avadhuta. Yes. Sometimes he'd lie in his own stool and not move. But the thing was, his stool was fragrant. Yes, anyway, you know what I mean. So therefore, saintly people could recognize that he was a Paramahansa. So Prabhupada makes the point, if you cannot make your own stool fragrant, don't imitate this. There was one fellow, I don't know if you ever saw him, in Vrindavan. His name was Govinda, and he was trying to be an avadhuta. And he would lie, and just lie there and just pass stool and everything while lying. Hare Krishna. Anyway, in this case, the Paramahansas, the advanced devotees, would recognize, he's actually very advanced because his stool was fragrant. Right, so second paragraph, the real purpose, if we talk of Jada Yoga, the real purpose is, Prabhupada says, prashanta karana, or subduing the senses. Yes. So the purpose of that yoga is to do that, but this approach is not possible in this age. Now the only process which will really work as we need it to work is Bhakti Yoga. So therefore we must follow Srimad Bhagavatam. So Rishabhadev, was the father of Maharaj Bharat, and he's from the 6th canto. And Maharaj Bharat is the person that this planet was named after, Bharat Varsha. Yeah. So Srila Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, Rishabhadev's mother was also known as Meru Devi. Although her name is mentioned here as Sudevi, it is sometimes proposed that Sudevi was another wife of King Nabi. But since King Rishabhadev is mentioned elsewhere as the son of Meru Devi, it's clear that Meru Devi and Sudevi are the same person under different names. Okay, so chapter 11, which is about Hayagriva. The Lord appeared as the Hayagriva incarnation in a sacrifice performed by me. Me is Lord Brahma. It's Lord Brahma who's reciting all of this. So Hayagriva is the personified sacrifices. And the hue, the color of his body is golden. He is the personified Vedas as well, and the super soul of all demigods. When he breathed, all the sweet sounds of the Vedic hymns came out of his nostrils. Wow. So there's a short purport here. Prabhupada makes the point, first of all, Vedic hymns are usually designed for fruitive sacrifices. But the Lord is the personification of sacrifice and hymns. And so Prabhupada says, therefore, one who is directly a devotee of the Lord is a person who has automatically both served the purposes of sacrifices and pleased the demigods. And devotee, Srila Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, the devotees of the Lord may not perform any sacrifice or may not please the demigods as per Vedic instructions. And still the devotees are on a higher level than the fruitive workers or the worshippers of different demigods. Okay, so verse 12. Verse 12 is about Matsya. At the end of the millennium, the would-be Vaivasvata Manu of the name Satyavrata would see that the Lord in the fish incarnation was the shelter of all kinds of living entities, up to those in the heavenly planets. Because of my fear, this is Lord Brahma, because of my fear of the vast water at the end of the millennium, the Vedas come out of my mouth, Brahma's mouth. And the Lord enjoys those vast waters and protects the Vedas. So verse 12, no, wait a minute, sorry. Yeah, the purport of verse 12. So Prabhupada explains, during one day of Brahma, there are 14 Manus. And at the end of each one, there's a devastation up to the level of the earthly planets. And those waters frighten even Lord Brahma. Yes. So in the beginning of Vaivasvata Manu, it sounds like he had not quite become Manu yet. But at the beginning of the would-be Vaivasvata Manu, such devastation would be seen by him. And Prabhupada makes the point that there would be many other incidents also, such as the killing of Shankasura. Yeah. So, Yeah. This all happened at the beginning of Vaivasvata Manu, and there are various other incidents also. So Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, this foretelling is by the past experience of Brahmaji, who knew that in that fearful, devastating scene, the Vedas would come out of his mouth, Brahma's mouth, but the Lord in his fish incarnation not only would save all living entities, namely the demigods, animals, men, and great sages, but would also save the Vedas. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.